Week 4 of the NFL season is here. Opportunity abounds at BetSafe. So let's talk about a few of these featured games, shall we? Why don't we start with the NFL's return to London? The NFL playing back-to-back weeks in London. This time it is Miami versus New Orleans. Saints a 3.5-point favorite at BetSafe. 49.5 the total here. Now the Saints just 1-2 on the season, but it's been a tough road so far. Minnesota, New England, and Carolina, all three of those teams have winning records, and two of those games have been on the road for New Orleans, but they are coming off a win. They picked up a nice road win in Carolina on Sunday, beat the Panthers 34-13, really dominated that game throughout. Was by far the best performance we've seen from this New Orleans defense, which had really struggled over the first two games. Drew Brees, of course, has been masterful this season, completing nearly 70% of his passes, 282 yards per game, 6 touchdowns, 0 interceptions so far. I'm sure he is licking his chops to face a Miami secondary that just allowed New York Jets quarterback Josh McCown to complete 18 of 23 passes. The Jets beat the Dolphins 20-6. That was a surprise because a lot of people think New York is the very worst team in the NFL, and the Dolphins won their first game on the road in San Diego. Keep in mind, Miami has only played 2 games because their Week 1 game against Tampa was postponed due to the hurricane. So what are we to make of this Dolphins team right now? 1-1, like we said, coming off an ugly loss. Their offensive line's playing really poorly thus far. They're only averaging 3 yards per rush. Jay Cutler, maybe still getting used to his weapons in the new offense there in Miami, but he's passed for 230 yards or fewer in both of his games thus far. He should have an opportunity to improve upon that against this New Orleans secondary, which, as we mentioned, is quite generous. But I'm just not sure the Dolphins have the weaponry to keep pace with this Saints offense, which is, once again, one of the best in the NFL. So I like the Saints here. I think they're going to win this game. I'm going to bet them on the money line at 169. Moving on now to Sunday night in Seattle, where the Seahawks host the Indianapolis Colts. Seattle a 13.5-point favorite at BetSafe, 42.5 the total in this game. Both these teams 1-2, but most people still regard Indianapolis as one of the worst teams in the NFL, and they still regard the Seahawks as one of the very best teams in the NFL. I'm not sure that's quite right on both counts. Yes, these Colts have an uphill climb to make the playoffs, but they did just win last week against Cleveland. And keep in mind, they almost won in Week 2. They should have beaten the Arizona Cardinals. They were ahead nearly that whole game before the Cardinals pulled out the 16-13 win late. I think that blowout on the road in Los Angeles in Week 1 when the Rams just had their way with this Colts team, I think that sort of was seared into a lot of people's mind. But keep in mind, Indianapolis with a different quarterback now. They've gone to Jacoby Brissett over Scott Tolzien. Brissett was very good last week against Cleveland, completing 17 of 24 passes for 260 yards and accounting for 3 touchdowns. 2 of those touchdowns came via the run. The Seahawks, look, I know it's early in the season, but I mean, they rank 25th in total defense right now. Now, do I think they're the 25th best defense in the NFL? No, I do not. I'm sure the Colts are going to have trouble moving the ball consistently in this game. But speaking of having trouble moving the ball consistently, have you seen Seattle so far this season? Yes, the offense came alive a little bit last week in a loss to Tennessee. Or I should say Russell Wilson came alive in that loss to Tennessee. Wilson throwing for 373 yards, but the Seahawks were still unable to run the football. And that's been a troubling trend for them this season. We think of the Seattle offense as a power-running offense, but the offensive line really playing poorly right now, and they just haven't been able to run the ball very well at all. So I'm wondering if the Seahawks are good enough offensively to be trusted as a favorite of nearly 2 touchdowns. This is such a big number to give, especially in the NFL. I mean, you lay a number like 13.5 and you really never feel good about things. The Seahawks could let off the gas a little bit in the fourth quarter, allow some garbage time points, and Indianapolis could sneak in there for the backdoor cover. Look, I'd be very, very surprised if the Colts were to win this game, but like I said, I'm just not sure 13.5 points is justified here, so I will be backing Indianapolis plus 13.5 here at 196. Final game I'd like to talk about in this Week 4. What about a good Monday nighter? The Washington Redskins going to Kansas City to face the Chiefs. Chiefs a 7.5-point favorite at BetSafe. 48.5 the total in this game. You know, 7.5 just seems like a big, big number to be giving a Washington team that's 2-1 and is coming off a great win over the Oakland Raiders. Not sure if you saw that last Sunday night, but the Redskins really took it to a good Raiders team. They outgained them 472 to just 128. Raiders with only 128 yards of total offense. And keep in mind, they're one of the most explosive offenses in the NFL, so just a great performance from the Washington defense. And Kirk Cousins finally came alive, recaptured that form we saw throughout 2016. Remember, This Redskins offense was second in the NFL in pass yards per game last year. Cousins averaging 297 yards per game, but started a little slowly through the first 2 games this season. But again, last Sunday, 25 for 30 for 365 yards and 3 touchdowns. He'll be facing a Chiefs secondary that is without its best player, Eric Berry. Berry, of course, will miss the remainder of the season with that Achilles injury. Now, Kansas City has been good this year, no doubt about it. They're one of only 2 undefeated teams remaining. But I think a lot of people still had that Week 1 performance against New England seared in their mind. And the last 2 weeks have been a little tighter for the Chiefs. Don't let last week's final score fool you. They ended up beating the Chargers 24-10, but the game was much closer than that. LA, it'll take me a while to get used to that. LA was within 1 score throughout most of the second half, really let some golden opportunities slip away, but handed to the Chiefs, they picked up the win. Still, though, I don't think this offense is scaring anybody. They're relying on a bunch of young players. Alex Smith still does not throw the ball downfield often. The Redskins, on the other hand, they throw the ball downfield plenty. I think Kirk Cousins really going to test this Chiefs secondary. I very much like the Redskins plus 7.5, and you know what? I think they're a good value on the money line at 335. I feel like this game would be just about a coin flip if we were on a neutral field. So I'm all over Washington plus 7.5 at 175, and I'm also taking a chance to Washington on the money line at 335.